current situation, your Palmetto State political pulse. I'm your host, Joshua Gale, alongside South Carolina State House Representative Jordan Pace. Every week, our goal is to help you navigate the complex world of politics through biblically conservative perspectives. Before we begin today's show, let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Joshua Gale, founder and designer at Val & Vine Jewelry. Here at Val & Vine, we understand marriage the way God designed it, a covenant rooted in unity and purpose. We also believe that jewelry is part of His design. We see it throughout creation, and we see it mentioned in the beginning of the Bible, beginning in Genesis. Gold is representing purity, diamonds representing radiance, and rings signifying commitment and covenant. At Val & Vine, our work blends this reverence with modern fashion and refined design. Every piece of jewelry is crafted with intention, guided by education, and delivered with confidence and kindness. At Val & Vine, every experience begins with a simple phone call. Whether you're just needing fashion and style guidance, or you're wanting to create something custom and uniquely yours. Whether you're envisioning a custom engagement ring, style guidance, or a meaningful gift, our goal at Val & Vine is to make your journey personal, clear, and enjoyable. So take your time, explore our collection, and when you're ready, schedule a commitment-free call with one of our team members. There's nothing we can't design together.
Well, I know we've got a lot to cover today, and got a lot of questions for you from my end. Seeing you've made the headlines a couple of times already here in 2026, and sometimes unfavorably and sometimes favorably. But it's always good to hear a conservative voice in the news and your opinion shared in that perspective. So I know we have a lot to cover today. Let's go ahead and jump right in. The first thing that I'm looking through here are obviously what we always love to talk about, taxes. For me, these are a big issue, especially with Christians and in the church, and folks that begin to cry a lot about taxes when they become passed. But the time to have made a fuss about it and talk to your representatives was when it was being voted on, when it was introduced into bills, when it was earmarked, things like that. And I continue. I've been in the church for a long time. I've worked for churches. I hear people that will come against their how their tithe money gets spent more than they care about how their tax dollars get spent in the state house in Columbia. There's 10% of, that they're actually physically writing a check for, or having a direct deposit. They see it, right? And therefore they feel like they have some major say in it. There's, some churches have a board, elders, things like that. Some churches, trust your leadership, and then a lot of churches, and I feel like all churches should have open books, give a report every year, exactly what's going to salaries, what's going to all that kind of stuff. Churches, you should be completely open about it. You have nothing to hide. Be open about it with your constituents. But what I'm getting at is that people don't have that same ambition to go after how their tax dollars, which is much more than 10% of your income, which you don't get a tax deduction for, or how that's getting wasted usually, by government spending. And so I want to bring that up. I want to put it back in everyone's faces that we can do something about it. It's not something that's inevitable that most politicians want you to think. It's already been done. You can't do anything about it. This is a part of life. Everything's certain. If there's two things that are certain, it's death and taxes. But no, I don't agree with that. I think that taxes can be fault to try to reduce them to get the government out of our pockets.
And here's the evidence of that. Last year, when this 4216 tax reform bill first reared its ugly head, the original version of it was going to raise taxes on 70% of the population, roughly. I mean, it was like somewhere between 67 and 70%. So a massive hike in taxes, and it would cut taxes on like 15% at the top. People called by the thousands. I mean, it was an overwhelming flood. So the original version passed subcommittee as the calls were coming in. It's a 5-member committee. The 2 Democrats didn't show up. So it was actually, ironically, 3 Republicans that voted for it and got it to full committee. Well, by the time they got to full committee, the brakes the brakes had been put on, and they said, "Well, maybe we need to rethink this because of the overwhelming uh, calls and emails and everything else." And we were ringing the alarm bells about it. Well, they changed it, so they made it, I guess, less egregious. It went from raising taxes on 70% of the population to raising taxes on about 26% of the population, um, while lowering taxes for maybe 26 to 30% of the population. Basically, it became a shift rather than just a hike.
because of the calls of constituents.
Because of the calls. You're right. So it's still not a great bill. And the Senate has now sent that back to us. And we'll get into that in a second, like what can be done. But that's proof that, like, if enough people call politicians, and that was last year, not an election year. This is an election year when filing begins in a few weeks. So this is when politicians, particularly in the House, are most sensitive to phone calls and pressure. So it can be done.
In my opinion, that is something we should all unite around, no matter what your party is or anything. We work so hard for our money, and it's just so hard to watch it wasted. Now, you can become ignorant. You can choose to not see how it gets spent. And then, ignorance is a bliss, and you're like, man, they're going to waste it anyways. And I guess we have some of the things, but do we have, is it being wasted? Or is it being stewarded well?
I've got the budget, this year's budget right here. I've been going through with my red pen, and I can tell you there's a lot of waste, a lot of bad.
Yes. Well, can't wait to hear more about that in the coming episodes. Let's start first. Let's go through the Columbia establishment is rejecting the Trump tax cuts. There was the big, beautiful bill that we've all heard so much about. It's one of my favorite things to watch is that Trump could say free McDonald's for everybody for a year. Everybody would just be up in arms about it. He could say the sky is blue and people would be so upset. So they hate the person. They're more obsessed with the person than they are anything that comes out of the establishment. And I think it's an obsession. I think I've said it before. I see them post, even if they're a Christian, I see them post more in disgust of Donald Trump than I do them posting about the gospel or what they learned at church or how much they love their family. I hate that for them. I hate that they're so obsessed because they're so offended or they just can't stand that person. I know they call it Trump derangement syndrome, but it may be true if you post more about him than actual conservative people do. And I watch it clearly. So in that big, beautiful bill, there were Trump tax cuts that would benefit South Carolinians. And tell us about that versus what the establishment in Columbia is trying to do.
Yeah. So the way the South Carolina income tax is set up is we're connected to the federal tax system in like standard deductions and all those things. So the one big beautiful bill, it did increase the standard deduction, which is good, but it also made it so there's no taxes on tips. If you're a worker who primarily works on tips, waitresses, bartenders, things like that. There's no taxes on overtime up to a certain amount. So if you're an hourly worker, you're working on the line somewhere in a factory or just do overtime work in general. So it would save a tremendous amount on that. Both of those on the federal side. So typically what happens, and there's also a higher senior deduction as well. Typically what happens in South Carolina for the last 50 years is we'll pass a bill every year. It's like a paragraph long that says South Carolina tax code will conform to federal tax code to catch up. And usually this is a good thing because it includes all those deductions. April Cromer introduced the bill 5167 this year because leadership hadn't. And here's why. Leadership won't do a conformity to the one big beautiful bill because they're trying to push this 4216 bill from last year. The Senate has now sent it back. They amended it a little bit, very thankfully, to get it back to the House where we can amend it again because it's a House bill. And if 4216 passes, it decouples us entirely from the federal system, which means no standard deduction, none of the other things, child tax credits, things like that. And again, broadly, 4216, it does slightly lower the rate of taxation, but it increases, for some people dramatically, the amount of your income that is taxed. So if you make more than $30,000 a year, what's above that 30,000 is taxed at the Senate version is 5.29%, but you don't get the standard deduction. You don't get all this other things. We ran the formulas. RFA ran the numbers on this, and it's still 26% of the population that would get a tax cut, or excuse me, a tax hike, and then about the same amount of people get a tax cut, and then for people in the middle, it's kind of the same. It's spread out all over the place on both sides, who would get cut versus who would get an increase. But primarily, those who would get an increase are in the range of like 120 to 320,000 a year for family income, particularly if you have kids, because you're missing out on those dependent deductions and things. So I ran a kind of comparison. I'll have it out later, kind of Excel chart to be able to like plug in your income and status, single, head of household, or married. It's almost ready. I got to tweak it a little bit so people can see for themselves how it would turn out. It is particularly if you're comparing conforming versus 4216. If you're a waitress with 2 kids, this hurts. If we conform, it saves you a whole lot of money. Obviously, on the not taxing your tips and this higher standard deduction, everything else. If we do 4216, you're paying a couple of $100 more a year in taxes that you can't afford. If you're a dad who's married and has 3 kids working in a factory for making $65,000 a year, and 15,000 that's overtime, you're plugging in 10 hours a week every week on top of your 40 hours a week. It's going to hurt you too. So that's what we're trying to preach that and trying to ring the alarm bell on that. We can just kill 4216. That's very possible, and pass conformity, or we can try to fix 4216, get everybody a tax cut. We're good with that too. The whole point is we don't need to raise taxes on some people so the others can get a tax cut. We can just cut spending. The budget this year is $2 billion more in income for the state, and revenue for the state, than we had last year. $2 billion more. We can afford to cut taxes for everybody. Is the grander point.
Wow. Seems like it makes sense to me in every single way. And it hits home too. Melissa and I were out to dinner the other night, not far from the house. And there was a woman, I always get to know my waitress, pray for my waitress, tip them well, all that kind of stuff. And this woman was a social studies middle school teacher, waiting tables so she could just take a vacation. This would hurt her. It'll hurt her tips that she was exhausted. It's exhausted. And obviously on her feet all day and then on her feet at night, just because she wants a vacation, obviously. So we work so hard for our money, and it's just so hard to see that and to know that we can cut taxes. We can keep more of the money that we work so hard to keep. I mean, Jordan, I've got almost 5 children. It is very, very, very expensive to have a family. And the more successful I am, the more expensive it gets. It's like I can't keep as much of what I'm making, and it's not going very far.
And all we got to sacrifice for people to keep more of their money, all we have to sacrifice in the budget is things like the Human Affairs Commission and the Sea Grant Consortium. And maybe USC Sumter doesn't, a 2-year school with dropping enrollment. Maybe they don't need $5 million to build a health and wellness and a fitness center. Basically, is what they're trying to do. Maybe Clemson doesn't need $10 million to build a computer lab when they have $1 billion in their endowment. Like those are the kind of things we found. I've identified almost. I'm just going to think about this. About 1,000 FTEs, like full-time vacancies for the state, that have been vacant for a year or longer. And last year, and when the budget came around, we identified about 1,000, a little over 1,000. It was $115 million that we could have cut that went into nowhere because these positions have been vacant for a year and continue to be vacant. So there's things we can cut that are not sacrifices for everyday family. This isn't cutting highway patrol, the prison system, education. It's cutting none of it. We're not cutting DOT. That stuff's not on the table. It's all this extra junk, pet projects and those kind of things.
Please keep us informed on that. Again, if you're hearing this, this is the time to weigh in on keeping more of your money in your pocket. This is the time to call your representative. This is the time to shine. Put on that cape and shine for the things that matter for the future of your family, and to get your representative that you voted for. That's your responsibility. You put them in office. They get them to hold their feet to the fire. A lot of these folks are there knowing that they are not being held responsible for stewarding, your vote, that you're giving them your vote, because you're not going to hold their feet to the fire. There's no accountability for most of these guys in Colombia, men and women in Colombia, because the people are at capacity. I get it. You're at capacity. It doesn't take long. You can text or call and let them know you by your first name. You know their name. Make sure they know you by your name and be the squeaky wheel. And hey, what are you doing on this? My father-in-law is incredible at it. He calls every office. He talks. He calls Tim Scott's office. He called and said, "What are you doing about this? Hey, this is how I feel about this, and I need you to make sure you know how I feel about this." He calls every constituent he's got. We have to do that. We have to be in a habit of doing it. The younger generation has to do it. Or we're going to end up with less and less and less as the years go by, wondering how the heck we got here. Because it's not an all out in your face. It's slowly over time. We're going to take a little bit more, take a little bit more, take a little bit more until you just think this is normal. This is normal. This is just the way it is. No, it's not, as the song says, the way it is. It doesn't have to be. So, moving along from that, I know I mentioned earlier you were in the press, and the quote that went along with that is people don't vote based on the color of their skin. Tell us what you were saying and why you're saying it, and kind of some of the defense around that, because we know that those short news clips don't capture everything.
Right. I had a hearing on a bill that I filed. The bill was filed last year, but the hearing was last week about changing the district lines for the congressional districts in South Carolina. So this would have changed 6 of the 7. The first district would have been left alone entirely. But the premise of this was the 6th congressional district, which Jim Clyburn has been in for, I think, 32 years, maybe longer, 16 or 17 terms. He's running for another term. It was drawn specifically for him, according to a ProPublica article about this, like not drawn for Democrats versus Republicans. It was drawn for him with his input. And congressional districts shouldn't be personal fiefdoms, for individual politicians. But the district's drawn, it's like a plus 16, 17 Democrat district. And the philosophy behind that, and philosophy around a lot of these gerrymandered districts around the country, is based on the kind of last remaining portion of the Voting Rights Act. That's vaguely, it's been interpreted to say in the past that you have to functionally draw districts keeping race in mind, like keeping the color of somebody's skin in mind. That's the part I disagree with. And that's what that quote was about. That people don't vote for whatever politician or whatever party based on the melanin content of their skin. That's a ridiculous premise. And there's a case before the Supreme Court right now out of Louisiana. This actually had been heard twice about exactly that. And the Supreme Court is going to decide sooner rather than later, from what I've heard, whether or not that part of the Voting Rights Act will remain intact. If they rule against it and say that the color of somebody's skin shouldn't have any effect on the congressional lines, then we have a really strong opportunity to change these lines in a way that makes the 6th district competitive. Not only competitive Republican versus Democrat, but even competitive for another Democrat who wants to run against this incumbent and have a shot, maybe even in the primary. So that's the goal. That was what the whole thing was about.
Well, how is that
If
district doing? How is Clyburn's district doing?
it's not doing well, I think roughly about 20% of that district's in poverty, in pretty awful poverty, which is much higher than every other district in the state. It's otherwise known as a corridor shame. If you're folks might have heard that term, based on a lawsuit from about 15 years ago, the shape of the schools we're in the area. It's not doing well. I mean, this is
Under his leadership.
undoubtedly right. And like I said, it's kind of his personal fiefdom. He's got a machine, like a political machine that's built into a lot of these places within the current district. If my map moves forward, it shifts a lot of his district out away from his machine, and takes it from like a plus 16, 17 Democrat district to somewhere between a +1 to +6 Democrat district. So it doesn't even favor a Republican. It just gives a Republican a chance at flipping that. Yeah.
And it's not, I wish people would understand this is not just about the people there. They have to understand that. Do you think Jim Clyburn is doing all the marketing for Jim Clyburn? Do you think Jim Clyburn is doing the newsletters? Do you think he's typing up that newsletter? Do you think he's sending you an email? Do you think that he's taking phone calls? Do you think he's influencing any of those things at the age he is, even if it was before now? That congressional district has been purchased for voting in Washington, D.C. Am I correct?
I mean, yeah, he was the number 2 or 3 Democrat when Nancy Pelosi was speaker. The guy's very, very powerful in D.C.
Right. It has nothing to do with taking care of his own district or the people there, and it's obvious to him he doesn't care having the district of shame. And I've been to those places. I was, I've worked in the past. I've worked with every community college in South Carolina. I've seen the worst. I've seen the worst public schools. I've seen everything in the most rural, remote parts of South Carolina, and things that I'm like, whoa, they got stuck in a decade back here, and it's pretty insane. But the government's not there to help. It is lost on me that people don't see that their vote has been sold and purchased for the betterment of a select few, not for them. And so I wish people would see that and see that there's more at stake. There's more to this whole formula than them. And it's time for change. We don't need long-term politicians. We need people who are really interested in the betterment of people. And how really do you live an incredible life that's honoring to God and to your family, your spouse, and everything, if you're a lifelong politician? I don't know.
And I think more than as much as the lifelong politician thing, it's being in one position for 32 years. Like, I can kind of understand, if somebody's
Political
a councilman,
career.
well, yeah,
Right.
if somebody's in county part-time, county council is part-time, city council is part-time, state legislature is part-time. Doing that for a while, and then doing something else, because
Right.
you bring some expertise stuff. Like, I get that.
Right.
You can make an
But
argument.
trips to
But being
DC.
right. But being in one position in Congress for 32 years was never meant to be. The founders never envisioned that, and
No.
to ever be a thing.
Correct. Thank you for the clarification on that. Yes, what I meant is the people that are back and forth, living there, almost sometimes more than they live here. So
many of them, correct.
yes. So, yeah, it's beyond me. I wish people would wake up and see it, and understand what's really at stake and what's the real funding behind it. So, looking at that, is there any other comments on H4 4714? Any of that, any other comments on that?
Yeah. We got our first hearing. We got what we need is we need a second hearing. We ran out of time, so we need a second hearing for everybody to be heard. There were a lot of people that weren't able to be heard on this redistricting idea, and we need to get a vote on it sooner rather than later. The other thing that got pushed because it was behind this in line in that committee, that 1-hour committee, was the shared parenting bill that's been filed. My friend Stuart Jones filed it for a long time, and before he retired, Gil Gatch from Somerville filed it this time. It's a pretty simple bill. It just says if there's a divorce proceeding and there's kids involved, it defaults to 50-50 between the mom and the dad, unless there's some sort of mitigating circumstances.
Okay.
Pretty simple thing. The trial lawyers, have fought it in the past for whatever reason, but it didn't even get heard. It was on the list, but didn't even get heard. So that's two things that people can call about and ask for a second hearing, sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Funny. I won't give much more time to it. I do agree. It is a mom leaning mom side of divorce court. And that all goes to everything in the state of South Carolina. DSS will give children to parents who are unfit, because they just don't know how to really deal with it, and it's kind of crazy. And I've gotten to see on the inside of that. But it's still funny coming from that gentleman right there, to be introduced. Let's see. Moving on. So we've discussed the tax hike, judicial reform, parenting rights. Let's talk briefly on the Pray Safe bill.
Yeah, this was a Democrat bill introduced. Beth Bernstein is the author. I think maybe it had a good intention from the start, but it would have created a $750,000 originally per entity grant program for religious entities, not necessarily churches, but religious 501c3 entities, for them to apply and get pretty broad, open-ended safety grants. It went through judiciary, which is strange because it spends money. But it went through her committee, which she's the chair of. And again, a Democrat chairing a subcommittee in the judiciary of a Republican supermajority House. It's very strange in and of itself. But it got to the floor and we asked some poignant questions about it, like, is this constitutional? Turns out probably not. What safeguards or what would determine who got this money if it were to go into place? Satanic temples be qualified for this under these rules, and it looked like they were. So we got enough pushback on it, and I think enough people called about it to say we don't want this, that it got sent back to committee, which basically means it got killed. So that's not going to be a thing anymore from the look of it. And the strangest interaction though was my friend Sean Magnuson was asking questions of the bill sponsor, Ms. Bernstein, and I think he was asking, like, would mosques qualify for this and other, like, temples of Satan, things like that. And she got fairly indignant and basically responded by saying, yes, they would. And it's ideologies like yours, Mr. Magnuson, that make them feel like they're not safe. So not a very collegial interaction there from the bill sponsor. But thankfully the bill's gone back to committee and it's no longer on the calendar.
Well, ideologies like ours, because we were the ones that, like Austin nightclub shooting this weekend. So killed 4 there. Ideologies like in Rhode Island, we have some dead children there. Canada, we have some dead people there.
It's not Christian ideology that's pushing this stuff. Yeah.
Joy Reid's wrong too. So pretty crazy, because it's just crazy to me that we can throw out more tax dollars to nonprofits who, already aren't being taxed, right? Already, things lean that way. But also, why not use already state-funded things, right, and provide more funding to SLED or, our one. We have one. What is it? The South Carolina. We're going to train all of our officers. We've got one. Everybody else does.
Police Academy.
Police Academy. We've only got one. Yeah. We could throw some money there so we could fund expanding of our one police academy and train people on how to protect their own churches.
Yeah, people don't realize. I don't think that we have less highway patrolmen on the roads now than we did back in like the early 90s. It's crazy. The money's there. It's just they're having a real hard time recruiting for whatever. There's a whole lot of backstory behind that. But to your point, there's a lot better ways we can use that money, more efficient and constitutional ways to use that money than to hand them out to 501c3s.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So that, and then it's just there's many, many, many ways to hand them out, and then to hand them out to what kind of organizations. I mean, I could be a retired police officer and have a training program for churches. I could have done it based on my opinion, but like, how do I, I mean, there are many organizations out there. What does the spending go to? How does it, get metered? Do I pay my cousin who can certify people,
Correct.
the local gun range? Like, who gets it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's actually an organization, a nonprofit that exists now that does training and does like security analysis for churches and synagogues and places that's free. Like they offer this service for free. I got him connected with my buddy Don when he was working for a Presbyterian church over in Dorchester Road. Got him connected there. They came and did an analysis for him, totally for free, not funded by the government, nothing, and gave him recommendations on safety stuff for their church. So,
Wow.
it's already there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talked about the Pray Safe bill here. We've talked about tax hike, parental rights. We've talked about Columbia establishment and rejecting tax cuts and what that looks like for tax hikes for people. South Carolina, Freedom Caucus. We've talked about. You guys have on your agenda this year illegal immigration. We've got tort reform. We've got universities and school choice. Closed primaries, which is a big deal. DOT reform, so we can actually get some better roads.
That'd be great.
Yep. DEI prohibition, reducing that tax burden like we discussed today, protecting unborn children. Again, parental rights, no federal funding that costs more than the dollar amount to implement the strings attached.
Let me give an update on
medical freedom.
Medical freedom. Yeah. So a couple things, and we'll get to medical freedom. The closed primary bill, we had a new and improved, it's 5187. This is just a clean, straight closed primary bill. Should be getting hearing in the next few weeks, and Judiciary Committee. So 5187, folks care about that, call Weston Newton, chair of that committee, and let them know. Medical freedom bill. So we had a really good bill. It's coming to full 3M. It passed subcommittee last week that would make ivermectin over the counter. So you wouldn't have to go get a prescription for ivermectin. You wouldn't have to go to Tractor Supply and get ivermectin. You can go to the pharmacy and get it. Several states will say to that. Several states have already passed this. It's already on book. I know Arkansas is one of them. So a friend of mine's a senator there. So that passed subcommittee. It's going to be in full 3M soon. And then in the Senate, it's kind of the other side of this, a bad bill. In the Senate, it's 897, extremist Democrat, filed this bill to get rid of medical exemptions for the MMR vaccine. Right now, if you're a parent, you want an exemption for your kid on any vaccine, period, medical or religious, or you just don't want your kid to have the vaccine, all you have to do is go to your local health department, fill out a form saying exactly that. It's pretty simple stuff. They stamp it and you're good to go. And your kid, they can't deny you entrance to government schools based on that. This bill would take that away for just the MMR because of the panic in the upstate primarily about the measles. So couple things about that. Thus far, DPH, Department of Public Health, has not done any genetic testing. They'll tell us on which measles strain this is. So if those folks don't know, there's two main strains of measles. There's the wild strain, and then there's the vaccine-induced strain. They haven't tested to find out which one this is. The other part about why do people get religious exemptions, somebody might ask, for MMR, really has nothing to do with measles or mumps. It's the rubella that's in the MMR. Prior to the 80s, you'd get a measles shot, a mump shot, and if you want a rubella shot, you can get that too. There were 3 separate shots. Well, for some reason, they put them all together. there is no really good reason to do that. That I can find, that I can run across anywhere. Well, maybe the money side. Yeah, right. It guarantees you can charge 3 times for one job, whatever. But it's the rubella is the issue. The original rubella shot prior to the 80s was not derived from aborted baby cells. The current version, so the current MMR, the rubella part of the MMR, is derived from, I think it's HEK, HEK 247. It's one of the HEK lines of cells that was
293.
293. Yeah, HEK 293. This was a baby that was killed in the womb. They harvested her cells and have been using her cells to develop certain kinds of vaccines, including this rubella. So many Christians have an issue with this, in frankly, kind of the similar way that Paul deals with, in Corinthians with eating meat sacrificed to idols. That's kind of what's been comparative to this. Like if you have a conviction about this, what Paul tells the church there in Corinth is like, don't eat the meat. And there's a lot of Christians that have a conviction about this. We're not going to participate in something that sacrificed a baby to create it. There's a similar argument with COVID, and of course we saw all the damage that the COVID mandates and things like that have caused. They really have yet to fully see maybe the results of that. There's been a big movement in the community. There's organizations that have been activated to push against this. There's going to be a whole bunch of people show up in Columbia this week wearing red. I think it's Wednesday is the hearing, to tell these senators, do not pass this bill. Keep the religious exemption in place. There's been no one has died from this measles outbreak in the upstate. No one's been like permanently debilitated by it. Thus far, it has been a whole lot of panic, and frankly, the Democrats trying to use that panic to further her agenda.
And so you have that, and then, which is just crazy. And in the vaccine schedule, it's all, the more you look into it, you're going, this is just crazy. But you're called a lunatic if you do look into it. So it goes back to COVID and everything, if all these other drugs are so good for us, how come they're not free? How come COVID vaccine was free?
Well, more than the cost of the free, like why can't you, if you're harmed by them, unlike any other drug, you can't sue the manufacturers for damages. Like that's
Correct.
The craziest part about the whole thing.
Yeah. Yep. And then all we know about autism and everything now, it's just, it's crazy. So that, and then we were going to talk about quickly the driver's license. And
Yes.
yeah.
So I've got a bill, it's got a hearing tomorrow, that says in order to establish residency to go to your local government school, you have to use a state issued ID or a federally issued ID. So a free state ID card, driver's license, passport, military ID. There's a list. You can't use an electric bill, a lease, things like that. That if folks are not here legally, then effectively they can't establish residency here for the purpose of using the schools. Kind of the broader idea there. Federally, the Supreme Court has said school districts cannot ask about citizenship, but they must confirm residency. So this is a constitutionally vetted way to do that. Reduce the strain on our school system, reduce the strain on our teachers, like classroom size, things like that. And the other side of that is it encourages those who are here illegally to go back to their country of origin. Like if you can't use the schools for free on our tax dollars, then they're going to go somewhere else, and ideally they're going to go back home, their country of origin. If they want to come back here, they do it the right way. They apply for the process, which is broken. Like we need to fix the process by which people do apply and to get residency and things like that. No denying that at all. But that's what this bill is about, and it's going to have a hearing tomorrow afternoon. So Tuesday, the afternoon of Tuesday the 3rd.
All right. Any other things that are coming up in the State House that we need to be on the lookout for?
next week's the budget. So I think we'll probably do a whole separate, we're running up on time here, but we'll do a whole separate episode on the budget preview. It's not great, but it's $2 billion more than it was last year, which is an insane amount of money, 15.4 billion. I was actually on talking to my old boss this morning, Governor Sanford, and I told him how much it was. And he said, wow, that's double what it was when he was governor not that long ago. Yeah.
Right. Wow. Well, can't wait to hear more about that, figure out where the earmarks are hidden and how we expose all the waste of government spending. And we thank you for your vigilance and looking through that and spending your time, making sure that we keep as much money in our bank accounts as we can, not for greed, but for the betterment of our families and the future of our families. So we thank you for that. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you learned something, and we hope that it has encouraged you to be more involved. Share this episode with a friend. Follow us on our social media channels where we'll break this episode up into different reels. You can share those different clips and pieces. Weigh in, give us some of your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree. We love discussion around these topics. Again, we'll follow up with you in the next few weeks, referring to the South Carolina budget. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.